Hey guys, this is Arab Wrestlers You Should Know in commemoration of April, which is Arab American History Month. And there aren't a whole hell of a lot of online Arab Americans in the wrestling industry, but I figure nobody's going to have a problem with honoring Arab wrestlers that have performed in the United States and have entertained us for many, many years into today. So, today, as you can tell by the thumbnail, I'm going to talk about Sami Zayn. And I'm going to start out with some things that you might know, some things that you might not have thought of, and then I'm going to talk about my personal experiences with Sami Zayn and what old Rand, a veteran of the wrestling industry, thinks of him. Rami Sabai was born on July 2nd, 1984 in Laval, Quebec. Both of his parents are Syrian immigrants to Canada, having relocated in the 70s. This is something I didn't know, and this is why I love doing black wrestlers you should know, women wrestlers you should know, and now Arab wrestlers you should know. Sami was trained by Jerry Tweet, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Tuite, and Savio Vega. That makes me and Sami Zayn cousins, only because I'm tight, I'm close with Savio Vega, and I don't think that there's a better worker in the last 20 years than Mr. Savio Vega. And this explains to me why Sami Zayn is who he is. Because Savio Vega, if you're not listening, just tells you everything's fine and just moves on. And the fact that he took the time to go ahead and acknowledge Savio Vega, that means Mr. Zayn gets it. He feels the same way I do. So look for the lessons to be learned in some of the stuff I'm about to read if you're a prospective professional wrestler, or even an idiot that smells it but can't quite find it, or in any industry. These type of things, these lessons are roadmaps if you take the time and you humble yourselves and you look at it and you can retain it. When Zayn made his WWE roster debut in May 2015, he was immediately thrust into a match with WWE legend John Cena for the United States Championship. What seemed like a big break for Zayn, who made waves with WWE's developmental brand NXT as his champion in 2014, it turned into a significant setback. Zayn was introduced that night by WWE Hall of Famer Bret Hart to considerable applause, but the debut dream turned into a nightmare. Inexplicably, a fired-up Zayn dislocated his right shoulder during his walk down to the entrance ramp after he punched the air to hype up the crowd. He wrestled Cena for 10 minutes, what was sidelined for 7 months afterward. All the momentum in his debut subsided. Now, can you imagine that? And what horrifying luck. You know, usually when something like that happens, WWE will look at you because they're publicly traded and they have to, just like football or any other sport, and say, oh, he's injury prone, he's injury prone. They didn't do that with him. I wonder why. When we get to the end of this tonight, guys, I will tell you why. Zayn's quirky personality, high-flying moves, and ability to deliver cutting-edge promos made him a favorite with fans as he established himself as a reliable mid-carder, either face or heel. Now, that mid-carder stuff that they're talking about, it makes sense. The business is still evolving where size doesn't matter, forget the pun, as much as it used to. But it's not 100% there yet. It's just starting to come into its own, where people of smaller stature, you know, in the industry that everybody formerly has the stigmata of being human dinosaurs on. He's only 200 and change and 6 foot and change. But anyway, the perception changed in the strangest of ways at last year's WrestleMania. As we all know, Zayn took on Johnny Knoxville in a singles match, featuring many of his Jackass friends and all the pranks and hijinks you'd expect from that group. The match delivered both action and plenty of laughs. Zayn lost the match, as many expected he would, but that moment turned Zayn into something more. Now, think about that for a second. And even at this level, I've had indie guys with absolutely no notoriety, indie guys that are legends in their own mind, and morons that have called themselves indie icons that just don't get it, okay? How much more could you, quote, unquote, be killed off? The match was funny, like when Zayn was stuck in a mousetrap, but he also showed off his innate ability to connect with fans through his outlandish expressions, timing, and ring psychology. What could have cemented Zayn as a comedy act showed the sort of talent he possessed all along. Now think about that for a second. How humble is this man, okay? And that humility shows through. And he didn't step up and say, I'm having creative differences, I want to go somewhere else, okay? He's bringing up all these great points. It's a part of him that the company had never seen to that point. And there aren't too many people in the industry at any place in the world today that could have carried Johnny Knoxville in a match setting. This is from Sami. My stuff with Knoxville had to happen to kind of be the linchpin. See, hear that word? Linchpin. The launching pad for the whole thing with the bloodline, Zayn said. My whole thing was like, man, I've been humiliated and I need to recover. I need respect, and this is how I get respect. So that's the logical direction to the bloodline. Can you hear there the absence of ego, idiots? Reigns, the WWE's Undisputed Universal Champion and leader of the bloodline, took notice. This is from Reign. I was entertained by him when he did the Jackass stuff and really respected the way he navigated that creative process. Remember when I told you a minute ago, guys, that there aren't too many people that could have made chicken salad out of that chicken shit? This is coming from Roman Reigns. And believe me, this man's got a lot of juice. A lot of people's careers could really rise with his thumbprint on it or stamp of approval. Even before Knoxville and Zayn butted heads on TV, Zayn heard about Reigns' desire to work with him at some point. So here we go, guys. We're coming up to the politics and how you got to learn to politic. And you can't politic successfully with an ego. So Zayn brewed up the Bloodline story and discussed it with WWE Creative before Survivor Series. It would be months before the idea was greenlit and moved closer to reality. But now it seemed the person who mattered most had given Zayn his imprimatur, like I know what that is. But listen to what Zayn said, and this is what I'm talking about again with politics, guys. Gals, theys. If I'm not lobbying, none of this happens, Zayn said. I don't want to say the whole thing was my idea. The concept was my idea. But I think I was brainstorming it with Roman one day, and he was on board. If Roman's not on board, it's not happening. But the idea of this arc, this on-screen relationship, these different dynamics within the group, a lot of that was stuff that had already been conceptualized. It didn't happen right away. It kind of just sat on the shelf for a minute, patience, and then the stars kind of aligned, and one part happened, and that led to the next part. So anyway, the rest is history. You guys probably know better what happened with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens at WrestleMania than I do, as I haven't seen it. I've only seen some news, and I haven't really clicked on it because the things that I get fed and I click on have all these goofy ads and exceptions of cookies, and I'm a little nervous to click on them. But I do know that him and Kevin Owens are real life pals. I do know that him and Kevin Owens paid enormous dues with Ring of Honor, and I do know the work ethic of both of those guys, as I was doing some business with Ring of Honor during the Kerry Silken years. And, I formed my opinions of a lot of people that stood out. And even then, young Kevin Owens, who was heavy set, and scrawny El Generico, Sami Zayn, stuck out. They were heads above a lot. I mean, I'm not going to say that because it kind of sounds insulting. They just stuck out. They were talented, and they were both talented in different ways. El Generico was so small and so tiny, okay? And let's face it, on paper, somebody probably saddled him with that joke gimmick, and that kid, that young man, I guess he's a young man to me because I'm 58, made it work. And not only made it work, he thrived with it. So I'm going to say in about 2003, it had to have been 2003, I rented my ring out, which I hated doing. I hated renting out my ring. I have a great ring. Premier Pro Wrestling owns a magnificent ring. It's a really safe ring, but it's a pain in the ass to move. So I don't like to rent it out. And the only reason I rented that ring out at the time, was because it was for a friend of mine, an old timer in the industry named Ed Schumann. And Ed Schumann was the NWA Midwest, and he started to run some shows in the Chicagoland area. And this wasn't too far from my home. It was probably 30 minutes in Streamwood, Illinois. I'd done it 2 or 3 times for him. And this was prior to me going to Puerto Rico and then going to work at TNA Wrestling and then finally going to Puerto Rico. But I would watch these shows and I would see these internet darlings, and I know that Zayn is referred to somewhere in the article, if I would have kept on reading, as one of the internet darlings. And I can tell you that my nose would turn up when I would hear the term then, this is 20 years ago, internet darling. But I watched this kid work on one of those shows, NWA Midwest in Streamwood at the Park District building, and I fucking got it. He could do anything in the ring. And a lot of what he was doing wasn't maximized. I'm not going to say that he didn't have a clue, because he certainly had a clue, and he certainly worked hard, and he certainly had a lot of heart. But the most impressive thing to me was the way that he worked. He was doing this unbelievably well-placed comedic gibberish in that Generico gimmick. And that just popped me. You couldn't help but laugh and realize that in one way, shape, or form, at the end of the night, with all those swinging dicks on the roster that were internet darlings, that El Generico, Sami Zayn, was probably one of the most memorable to the wrestling fan. Now, the last time I rented a ring to Eddie, and I remember this like it was yesterday, I'm not one to go up and say, "Hey, kid, that was a great match." I don't really go up to people that I don't know yet or have no rapport with, especially when they're younger than me in the business, and say anything like that. I'm not really overly willing to cast my pearls before swine because I've been burned so many times. But anyway, there was a point there where we were in the parking lot, maybe walking to the White Hen Pantry or something, and Sami Zayn, or I didn't know his name was Sammy then, I didn't know his name then, I just knew that kid that does the El Generico gimmick, okay? So he's walking a few steps behind me and a couple of the guys that I knew that I was with, and he says, "It's so frustrating. I can do all these great things in the ring. I can do these high spots. I can wrestle. I just don't know when to do them or where to put them." Guys, this is when El Generico was considered an internet darling. I turned around and said, "Hey, pal, you and everybody else today." The difference between him and everybody else in 2003 and almost everybody else, I should say almost everybody else in 2003, and almost everybody else in 2023, is they're not humble enough to admit that, okay? That's a humility. That is a commodity. That is a talent. That is a personality trait that World Wrestling Entertainment and any other company where you can make a decent living at pro wrestling, a real living in the industry, is looking for. You either have it or you don't. If you don't have it, there's no way that you can't get it if you're willing. But this kid at the time had to be 20 to 21 years old, and I knew from what I heard and saw for myself, this was a student of the game. And man, oh man, the rest is unbelievable history. God bless Sami Zayn. When I do watch WWE programming, I guess mostly on Raw, I see somebody that works their ass off and compels and connects with the crowd. He does what's asked of him with a big, proud smile and attitude that exuberates out of the young man, and the rest is history. By the time Sami Zayn is in his 50s, he'll be able to retire if he wants to. This is the kind of person I'm talking about that's drawing you a roadmap, and you can't learn the things that Sami Zayn set out to learn working on indies or watching the Santino Brothers YouTube channel, folks. This is something that can only be learned by somebody who's been there, done that, and knows what I'm talking about. Knows what Sami Zayn was talking about then, El Generico, and knows what Savio Vega had probably planted the seeds in Sami Zayn when he was that age. I knew there was a reason I liked him, and once again, today is the first time that I knew that Sami Zayn and I were connected via Savio Vega. Okay, guys, this is Arab Wrestlers You Should Know. Please know it's being brought to you without commercials or YouTube commercials and ads. So please, at the very least, be cool enough to like and subscribe. And you can check out in the description how to support Premier Pro Wrestling.